Today, I am starting a new book. This book is called Compassion Now, and it is by His Holiness Gyalwang Karmapa. And it is compiled from talks that were given in 2010. The bio in the beginning of the book was short, and I'm going to sum up that. It covered a little bit about his birth and early life, being discovered and then brought to Serpu, where he was trained. And then in 99, December, very close to the new year, 2000, he escaped. And it was a difficult escape and somewhat emotionally difficult because of the close encounters with the Chinese military. But it ended by saying that he is a scholar, a meditation master, a painter, a poet, a songwriter, a playwright, and a calligrapher. So I'm emphasizing that because he is very talented in a wide range of activities. So the first chapter is Compassion, the Basis of Buddhism. That's really what the book is about, but he starts out with this chapter saying that the point behind all the Buddha's teachings is its compassionate conformance to the actual needs of beings, that all the Buddha's teachings, and he gave a wide variety of teachings, were given to the audience that attended these teachings. And when the Buddha first started teaching, he taught primarily what we call now the foundation vehicle, the Four Noble Truths, the five skandhas, which describe the development of ego and karma and so on and so forth. Later on, when his students understood these to a certain extent, then he started teaching about emptiness and more advanced subjects. And then finally, the third turning of the wheel that the Buddha gave, the third set of teachings, was about qualities, that besides emptiness and no self, that there also is Buddha nature and qualities that are encompassed in Buddha nature. So what he is saying here is that the Buddha taught, and his teachings were about compassion overall, and he taught according to the needs of the people he was teaching to. The definition of compassion is, quote, the wish to liberate all beings in samsara. So this is the Mahayana version, you might say, of compassion, not just to ease their suffering temporarily, but permanently remove beings from suffering altogether. And he says it's difficult to develop true love and compassion for others because we have internal obstacles and adverse conditions. I want to make a point here that the translator for this book is Yeshe Gyamtso, and frequently where Lama Yeshe Gyamtso translates the word love, frequently others would translate it as loving kindness. So I wanted to point that out. I think it would be safe and perhaps even wise to remind ourselves that it's about loving kindness, which kind of gives a slightly different view of this idea of love. So these obstacles to love or loving kindness are hatred, jealousy, desire, any of the other afflictive states of mind. They block our development. They block our ability to cultivate the quality of love. And the definition of compassion for others is, quote, the observation that suffering and that you seek a remedy for that suffering of others. And then there is compassion for self. This is the observation of one's own suffering and seeking a remedy for that. Karmapa calls this inwardly focused compassion or renunciation. Renunciation is a form of inner focused compassion, whereas outer focused compassion is seeking a remedy for the suffering of others. And it's obvious that a person who is a beggar, you can give them a meal, you can give them enough money to buy food for a week, but it's only very, very temporary. We who are not beggars, at least me, I like to eat 3 meals a day. If I go on a fast, at the end of it, I like to eat a lot of food. So eating is something that is constant, the need for nourishment, and this need for water is constant. And so no matter how much you will leave the suffering of others, it's temporary unless you help liberate them from samsara. So the bodhisattvas are focused on this outer compassion, wanting to liberate beings from samsara, not just give them temporary release from the suffering. There are 3 ways that bodhisattvas can be motivated to liberate beings from samsara. And he lists them from the lowest to the highest motivation. The lowest is that they are trying to liberate themselves from samsara only. The second is they're wanting to benefit others, to liberate others. The third is to want to benefit both themselves and others. Now, interestingly enough, he says that this first or this least motivation still can be a bodhisattva because you cannot liberate others unless you've tamed yourself first. So it always starts with working with yourself. But if you look within and admit what you see, that we are immersed in samsara, you really have to do this unfinished work of liberating yourself from samsara, that there's work to be done, that we have to be liberated too. And so this motivation number 1 is acknowledging that there's a lot of work to be done. However, if we look at others, we realize that in past lives, because of interdependence, as well as this life, that many, many, many beings have done things that have been very beneficial to us. Personally, when I look back at my life, more and more I see how so many people have benefited me in big ways, in so many different areas, and then all the little people who have benefited me over the years that you never see. Going back to food, I've eaten a lot of food in all of these years, a lot of meals, a lot of them were prepared by other people. Most of the food was grown by other people. Most of the food I bought or someone else bought, and on and on and on. If you look at interdependence, that you will find that most of what you value in life, at least monetarily, has passed through the hands of many people, figuratively, if not literally. He also says that regardless of our motivation, it's really important to avoid meaningless or trivial activities. Now, this was 2010, and in terms of digital distractions, it has mushroomed in the last 12 years. And on and on and on. He says that our life keeps getting busier and busier. When do you stop? You ask yourself, is what I'm doing with my life meaningful? When I do that and look at my life now, and or look at, shall we say, life, not just my life, but life for most people now versus 50 years ago, 100 years ago. My house was built in 1895, roughly. It had an open front porch where I have no doubt people would sit on sometimes and watch the horses and the buggies go by and maybe wave to the people, and the people might even stop and you have a little conversation. The house is very close to the road. Who has time to sit on the porch and watch people go by and wave at them and have a conversation? No, if you were sitting out there, you'd be looking at your cell phone, maybe even taking a selfie and post it on Facebook. Oh, it's so nice to be out here on this front porch enjoying the afternoon or evening breeze. And of course, you're not enjoying it all. You're involved in your cell phone and Facebook and trying to prove to other people that you're having a good time and in a good place. And maybe if you can prove it to other people, you can prove it to yourself. And meanwhile, you have a lot of self-doubt and an inner critic, and your mind and stomach are churning around. Other than that, that's modern life. There's just so much that we get involved in, and it just seems like, well, in Gyalwang Karmapa's words, and he said this over 40 years ago, that it's like we're afraid if the engine idles, it'll die. So it's easy to get sucked into the digital world and all the things that are happening and going around us. It's really important to step back and look and ask yourself, is this really that important for me to do? Is what I'm doing meaningful? Is it necessary? Take time to make friends with yourself, to get to know yourself. Quote, we have to think deeply about this and carefully reflect on what is of true benefit to ourselves, because at this time it may be quite unclear to us, end quote. Again, I've noticed since I first started the center here, which was 25 years ago, it's hard to believe, 25 years, KTC here. But when I first started, if I would do a weekend program, many people would show up for all the talks, the 2 talks Saturday and the 2 talks Sunday. Now it's very difficult to get someone to attend all 4 talks, or even more than one day. And I suspect this is common at other centers too. It's not just here. It's a matter of people are just very, very busy and have so many things to do. He goes on then to talk about how traditionally it is taught to turn your mind to the Dharma, which is to contemplate the 4 thoughts of impermanence, precious human birth, karma and its effect, and that there's no satisfactory state in samsara, that they all have suffering. So I'm going to go over these a little bit more than he went over them. First is precious human birth. Contemplate that you have a human birth this time around, but there is no guarantee that next time around you'll be born a human. And not only do you have a human birth, and human birth is best because it is in the human realm that you can come in contact with Buddhism, that you have enough leisure in many cases to practice and study and attend teachings. And in the God realms, you're too overwhelmed with bliss and entertainment and so forth to really even have the desire to practice. And in the 3 lower realms, it's impossible to really practice. One of my very worn out old jokes is that you can teach a dog to sit, but you can't teach him to meditate. Being born in the human realm and then coming in contact with Buddhism, having an interest in it, meeting teachers, receiving instructions, it's very, very, very precious, and it's very rare. It's actually exceedingly rare. Many people have come in contact with Buddhism in the human realm, but how many really practice it seriously? Even among the Tibetans, who can be very, very devoted to the Dharma, very, very devoted to the teachers, you see them out at KTD, where a busload will come up from New York City when there's a holiday, Losar, for instance. Then they'll come up and take part, maybe in a ceremony, or maybe they just go and make offerings, walk around the place, take some pictures, talk. Sometimes you'll see them in groups singing and dancing around Losar time. But in terms of attending teachings or attending retreats, you don't see them. And so the Tibetans, they might have a lot of devotion, a lot of respect, but it isn't that they necessarily are practicing at the level that you are practicing. On the other hand, if you want to go the other direction, there are some people that are extremely devoted to the Dharma and practice very, very diligently. When I do Nyungne here, some people will stay in the shrine room in the evening after we quit and do their own practice for hours and then go to sleep. And then 5 o'clock in the morning, they're out in the shrine room, ready to start the Nyungne again. Be that as it may, no matter what your level of participation and devotion, it's rare in the human realm. So contemplate the next thought, which is impermanence, and this is that it won't last your present human life, that it is good for maybe a few more years, maybe a few more than a few more years, but still it's a small number. Now is the time to take advantage of it rather than, oh, I'll take care of that later. Something that I hear from time to time from people from a non-Buddhist tradition, usually some New Age group, or just people that have a, let's just say, a passing idea about what rebirth is. And I've heard this, and maybe you have too, that, well, I'm here to learn something, and then next life, I'll have another lesson to learn. Kind of like we got a bunch of check boxes here, and this life, I'll check that box, next life, that box. And you keep going up and up and up until you're wherever. And it doesn't work that way. You can go up and you can go down. Because of impermanence, you want to work going up. It's much better than going down, and it's even better than being at a similar place next life than you are this life. I think most of us will agree that it would be nice to have a better life next time than this life was. The third one is karma, the law of karma, and the contemplation is that our actions have consequences. And so it is important to have disciplined conduct so that we can have control of the consequences that we face in our next lives, as well as this life. So what that means is practicing and studying, attending teachings and so forth. This creates good karma and good circumstances in the future, and engaging in negative behavior creates problems and suffering in the future. This helps give you an idea of what to renounce and what to encourage. And then the last one is there's no satisfactory state in samsara. It's pretty obvious with the hell realms, the hungry ghost realms, and the animal realm. While some animals have a very good life, some dogs have lives better than people, maybe cats too. Because some dogs have nice houses, warm houses. They don't have to pay rent. They don't have to have a 8 to 5 job and pay taxes and so forth. Somebody else feeds them, pets them. Then they just have to wag their tail and be friendly. Maybe give the owner a rub every once in a while. But still, a dog suffers, and a dog doesn't have nearly the intelligence of a human being. I've seen on, I think it was PBS, a program. I can't even tell you what it was about, but it was a scientific program. You could tell a dog, get the ball, and the dog would go get the ball. But if you show him a picture of a ball, the dog would not go get the ball. If they did that with a monkey, the monkey would go get the ball. Well, dogs are smart. Again, they're not as smart as humans. And a lot of animals that we think are majestic and so forth, maybe they look majestic sometimes, but other times they don't look so majestic. For instance, a bald eagle. They look quite impressive when they're circling up in the sky quite high, or if you see them on a limb. And yet I have seen them across the road from my house in the wintertime eating roadkill. And I don't know, standing on the side of the road eating roadkill just doesn't seem that glamorous and majestic, if you ask me. And I don't think most of us would want to be outside in 30 below zero weather like an eagle is, with no place to go that's warm, no fire, and forced to eat roadkill. It just doesn't sound like my idea of a good way to spend the winter. In all seriousness, the animal realm, you really don't want to hang out in. You don't want to spend time there. And the two God realms, they have their own sufferings. And while there's plenty of pleasure in both of them, again, you don't have an interest in Dharma, and so you can't liberate yourself. And at some point, you run out of good karma and you die and you go to a lower realm. And that doesn't seem like a good deal. So these are the teachings about there's no good place to hang out in samsara. I don't have to tell you about the human realm, but I will. Read the news. War, famine, discrimination, random shootings, chronic disease, epidemics, people being angry at each other, people disrespecting each other, people not having enough, no matter how much they have. There are some people in the world today that have close to $300 billion, and it's not enough. Well, what is enough? There's never enough because of impermanence and uncertainty. Happiness is impermanent. Your ego is impermanent. Your ego needs constant maintenance. So instead of being happy with what you have and sitting on it and having a good time, you have to prove who you are by bringing in more money. Anyway, I'm going on and on in a way that wasn't even in the book, but these are important because otherwise we get overtaken by laziness and even denial. And for us as Buddhists, the ultimate aim is to become a bodhisattva or a Buddha and keep returning over and over and over and bringing people to liberation and other beings to liberation. This is deep understanding of our situation, and you might say the hopelessness of being a human being or any being in samsara. It's extremely important. If, on the other hand, we can achieve in samsara a state of happiness, and it's built on the cultivation of loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, this wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. He mentions Hinayana nirvana, which is this realization of emptiness, but it's not coupled with love, compassion, and bodhicitta for others. It's done for one's own benefit. And Rinpoche, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, explained this a number of times. Karmapa does not talk about it, but this is what happens when you attain Hinayana nirvana, is that you go into a deep samadhi, your mind does, and you stay in that samadhi for eons, and you'll never take rebirth again, but you're not in a pure realm either. And eventually you come out of that samadhi, and then you progress on the path, and eventually then attain Buddhahood. But it's a very, very, very slow process. And it takes a long time before you even have the motivation to progress on the path to benefit others. The point being that we start with where we are, but we want to include as frequently as possible the motivation that we're practicing so we can also benefit all beings as well as just ourselves. Bodhisattvas find that this Hinayana nirvana is unacceptable because they see that beings have helped them over and over and over again in their present life and in their past lives. And traditionally, they say to contemplate all beings have been a mother or a father or a brother or a sister or a spouse to us. from the beginningless beginning. Then he talks about the difference between a bodhisattva and a Buddha, and that ideally it takes a Buddha to liberate all sentient beings or work towards liberating all sentient beings, because sentient beings are limitless in number. They're limitless in terms of location. They are all over. Wherever there is space, there are sentient beings. This new telescope, the Webb telescope, has been taking pictures deep, deep, deep in space. Well, there are sentient beings there. It's not just here on the Earth where there are sentient beings. We're talking about a limitless number of beings in a limitless amount of space. And I don't know, maybe these physicists have been able to wrap their mind around how much space, the limits of space is, but a very simple question is, how far is up? How far is up? Go out tonight. It's kind of mostly clear here. And think about that. How far up is it up there? And so limitless space and limitless subtle differences between beings. So this is what motivates bodhisattvas. Well, I guess I was going down the four limitless ones: limitless love, limitless compassion, limitless joy, and then equanimity, limitless equanimity. So I might as well complete that before I go on. Limitless beings, and so therefore it requires a limitless amount of love and a limitless amount of compassion for them. Now the joy comes, this is a quality of our Buddha nature, and bodhisattvas have this. They keep coming back and liberating beings over and over, lifetime after lifetime, and they're happy doing this. They're not doing this like, this is the job that I took on, and it's kind of the pit some days, but I do it anyway. No, it's not like that. Bodhisattvas just work and are happy no matter what they are doing. And then the equanimity is that they don't play favorites, that they have this love, compassion, and joy for all beings, even the difficult ones. On the other hand, Karmapa says that it is best if you attain Buddhahood because, quote, in order to affect and benefit all beings, one needs to possess omniscient wisdom that is only achieved through Buddhahood. And that can, because it literally knows everything, know the exact needs, dispositions, and makeup each and every being has to be able to benefit them. So this is why bodhisattvas want to be Buddhas. It is for the benefit of others. And again, the best kind of motivation is the two benefits: benefit of others and benefit of yourself. Now he talks a little bit about the nature of mind. And mind is limitless. It has no boundaries. And the way things appear is the way they are, or their true nature. And when a person becomes a realized Buddha, they see the nature of all things, and they see that that is also the nature of mind. So you see the way things appear. We are familiar with the way things appear, but the way things appear is not real. It's empty of inherent reality. And the way things are is their true nature. And a Buddha would see these as not being separate from each other. You could say, like two sides of a coin, heads and tails. One side is the way things appear. The other side is the way things are. They talk about one taste. And so the mind of a Buddha is inseparable from the way things appear and the way things are. And then he says that it's difficult to discuss this since we haven't achieved it, and therefore we're not familiar with it. It's just ideas and concepts at this point. And quite honestly, it can seem quite outlandish. What do you mean this computer here isn't real? I paid real money for it. It gives me real problems. I'm seeing you people on the screen. So it's difficult for us ordinary beings to understand this. But he says there are indications that we are going towards the goal, that we're actually traveling the path. So the question to ask is your love, your compassion, and your bodhicitta growing? Quote, being inseparable from these is the most authentic sign of pursuing that. So to finish up, it's not enough to hear about suffering. We have to take actions. It would be excellent to have more cooperation among different groups rather than having people being adversarial in their relationships with others and other groups, other religions, other groups within the religion, and so forth. And we need to demonstrate love and compassion. And then finally, we need to have compassion for ourselves first, or there's no basis for us to grow. There's no basis for us to improve our compassion for others. He compares it to a beggar who wants to give money to others, but he has no money to give. So we have to start with ourselves. And I will finish with a final quote. If we cultivate kindness to and love for ourselves, we will, on that basis, be able to have even more love for others.